Good morning, everyone. We're starting today the portion of Teruma, and we're starting from selections from Leskutei Sichot, the second Sicha, the second talk of the Rebbe and Teruma. To me, this is a very close to my heart talk because I heard the Rebbe speak it. I was there, present while the Rebbe said, and it was in one talk, in several talks, but on the same day that the Rebbe spoke about. So my goal is to try and complete the entire talk, even though it's very long. Some sections I will summarize because we're going into pilpul. Many parts are deep pilpul that it shows how the Rebbe's way of understanding this, explaining this one question, also accommodates for many other questions that different rabbis ask. So we start. Among the materials that God commanded the Jews to bring for the building of the sanctuary was cedar wood. And for that cedar wood, Atzei Shittim, Rashi comments. How many types of contributions to war offered by God for the Jewish people to give? 13. Starts with zahav, gold, silver, copper, crimson wool, linen, etc. One of the items is cedar wood. Now, if I had a pair of glasses or I had a BMW to donate to the building of the sanctuary, did not work, not acceptable. It had to be one of the 13 types. Later on in the Holy Temple, if I had a BMW or I had a dining room set, I can donate it to the Holy Temple. And the Gizbar and the one in charge sells it, and the money would be used for sacrifices, for improvements of the structure. But at the temple in the desert, there were only 13 types that they can bring. Now we're going back to the cedar wood. That's going to be most of the discussion today. And from where did they get this wood in the desert? Where do you have? In the desert, nothing grows. Yeah. When do they have? Rabbi Tanchuma explained that our father Yaakov foresaw with the Holy Spirit that the Israelites were destined to build a sanctuary in the desert, he therefore brought cedar trees to Egypt and planted them there. He commanded his sons, who conveyed this command to their children and later descendants, to take them along with when they left Egypt. Let me just explain. Yaakov came to Egypt. He brought with him small plants of cedar trees because he knew one day they will use it for the building. He planted them in Egypt, in the section in the area where the Jewish people lived. And then where he told his children, before you leave the land of Egypt to the desert, chop those trees and carry them with you. And that's where they had them for. By the way, I think I shared with you in the past that I have a research for someone who has there is a cedar trees growing in Egypt in a very specific area only. Even though they are not native to Egypt, they are there. And a very, very similar, same family is in the north part of Israel and in Lebanon. Part of Lebanon is the Holy Land, by the way. It's the first, I believe, 15 kilometer of Lebanon is part of the biblical Holy Land. And those same cedar trees, and they science are sure that those that are growing in Egypt came from the Holy Land. Yes, Harry.
Since I was as clutch cautious, every time I brought up something about being able to get something in the desert, you'd say there were Arabs or the people who sell stuff. So.
Good question. We have a scholar here who is asking very good questions.
Can you repeat that question?
Every time I asked the rabbi a silly question about the Jews in the desert, the rabbi would say, Harry, they'd buy stuff from people around them. I mean, there were nomads out there who were selling stuff.
Just like everything else. So why did Yaakov, that's the entire, today we hope to cover all of it. Exactly. Clarification is necessary, says the Rebbe. Rabbi Tanchuma's interpretation appears to be Aggadic in nature. It's Aggada. It's not the simple text. Without having a source in the simple, straightforward interpretation of Scripture, there is no place in the Torah that says that Yaakov did it. It's Aggada. It's part of the Medrash. Medrash is Aggada. Since Rashi composed his commentary to present the straightforward interpretation of the Torah's words, Rashi's job is to make you understand the text. No Agada, no Medrash. Therefore, says the Rebbe, it is necessary to understand why he felt compelled to offer this interpretation rather than a much more direct one, as Harry mentioned, that the Jews purchased this wood from the non-Jewish traveling merchants, or as the Ibn Ezra and similarly Rabbeinu Balei HaTosfot comment, that there was a forest of cedar trees growing close to Mount Sinai, that the Jews cut the wood from there. The Rebbe is asking a simple question. It's more than one question, actually. A, Rashi is there to explain the text. Bringing a commentary that's a medrash without a source in the text is not Rashi's way of teaching us. Number two, Rashi had a better interpretation. Either the Ibn Ezra says that they purchased it from merchants that travel around, that they had oil, they also had other material, they also had cedar trees. Number two, says the Rebbe, the Medrash, the Ibn Ezra says that there was a forest of cedar trees that grew next to Mount Sinai, and that's where they got it from. But to say that Yaakov, how many years earlier, anybody knows? 200 years earlier. Why? Some commentaries explain that Rashi was compelled to interpret the verse here in this manner based on a later mention of everyone in whose possession cedar wood was found, which explicitly indicates that the Jews already possessed this wood at the time the command to bring it for the sanctuary was given. Ibn Ezra also cites this verse. It says later in Vayakel, in 3 more portions, that when they actually bought it, it says that anyone who's in possession had the cedar tree, they brought it to God. So therefore, it must be that it was there in their possession, and not that they went to purchase it, or not that they went to cut it. And therefore, Rashi would have to explain to us that Yaakov already sent it out with them, so that it was in their possession.
By the way, when Yaakov,
However, since Rashi does not mention this later verse, it is extremely difficult to say that this is what compelled them to offer the above interpretation. It is very forced to say that Rashi relies on this later verse to explain his commentary here. Says the Rebbe, I don't understand. If it comes to accommodate a text that appears in 3 weeks, in the portion of Vayakel, which now is Teruma, you have Tetzaveh, Kistis of Vayakel, Rashi would explain that later on when the problem comes up. This is a child who is studying Torah. He doesn't know that the Torah says that it was there in their possession. And Rashi is accommodating, if Rashi is accommodating in their possession, that's why he's bringing that Rabbi Tanchuma says that he bought it, Yaakov bought it with them to Egypt. It doesn't make sense. This place is not the right place to explain it. So therefore, said Rabbi, it's impossible that that's the reason that compelled Rashi to give us that explanation. Yes?
they took the trees with them, or they cut it up in Egypt and took the planks with them.
I don't know.
Because with Ruach HaKodesh.
By the way, we're going to discuss it too.
Okay.
Says the Rebbe, the explanation, it is possible to offer the following straightforward resolution to the above quandary. The command to donate towards the construction of the sanctuary is worded, have them, that is the treasurers, take an offering for me. Take my offering from every man whose heart motivates him to generosity. This is the offering you shall take from them. Every time the Torah talks about the transaction from the giver, from the donor to the recipient to the treasurers, it doesn't say let them give, let them donate, nowhere. Always it says, veikhu, tikhu meitam, veikhu li truma. Ikhu is the treasurer taking it from the donor. And it's very peculiar. It should have been, the emphasis should be on the giver. Veitnu li truma, veitremu li truma, me'ed kol ish asher yitvenu libo, yiten et trumati, let him give. Nothing about the giver. It's all about the taker. It's a treasurer. And we need to understand why. That's Rashi's problem. On the surface, it might seem that the Torah should have used forms of the verb to give, to bring, or the like that emphasize the act of the people who generously donated an offering. Why does the Torah use the forms of the verb to take, that instead of emphasizes the action of the sanctuary treasurers who were charged with taking the offerings from the Jewish people? Why are you emphasizing on the treasurer taking rather than the giver? Because after all, it depends on the giver. If the giver refuses to give, nobody is going to take it from him. You're going to take a donation from somebody who wants to give you. He calls you up and says, come to my house. I have cedar wood. I have oil. I have gold. Come take it. The Torah is talking about the taker, the taker, the taker. But the action is pending on the giver. When addressing the people making the donations, the Torah uses the term teruma, translates as offering, which Rashi interprets as meaning separation. The donors should set apart from their possession an offering for me. This wording does not emphasize the act of giving to God, but merely setting aside the offering from the remainder of their property to serve as a donation. The wording of the command addressed to the treasurers, have them take for me, implies that the donors had already performed the act of separation. All that was necessary was the treasurers to take it. What the rabbi is saying is that when God is talking about the Jewish people donating, it doesn't say to donate. It says v'ikhu truma. You know what truma means? Truma means to lift up. Le'arim means to elevate. Truma means to lift up from the rest of my possession and dedicate it to God. That's why we have truma in a farmer needs to give a part to the priest. It's called truma. Why is it called truma? Because you lift up. It says you have to lift up, and then you say this is dedicated for the priest. So here, when God wants them to donate for God, for the temple, they need to lift up, a meaning to separate it from the rest of the possession. That's it they had to do. The treasurer then come and take it from them. So they were not giving. They never give. But the emphasis here, the Rebbe is going to point out, and I'm giving you a heads up, is that everything that they wanted to donate, to contribute, had to be in their possession before. All they had to do is separate it from the rest of their possession. If they had to go and purchase it, it wouldn't be accepted by God. God wanted now, go and see what you guys have, and you can separate part of it and elevate it for me, and the treasurer will come and take it for me. Yes.
When you think about the fact that 600,000 adults went out, and each one, according to whatever, the Gada, had 90 donkeys full of goods. For them, it was nothing to give. It was theirs. You have to worry about being somebody else's. Everyone had 90 donkeys full of golds and diamonds and no one. 600,000. You realize it must have been like a whole desert full of Jews when you think about it.
So I have just I want to address this. It comes to show you that giving for tzedakah is so difficult, regardless of how fat is your bank account.
Okay.
And until today, I'm a live testimony for that. Number two, I can prove it to you. Number two, actually, they brought in way too much. And in 2 days, they have amassed more than what's necessary. And Moshe says to them, what? Enough is enough. You cannot do anymore. And since then, the Jews adhere to that command. They don't give. When I ask somebody, are you coming to the gala? It's a fundraiser. No, I can't. Moshe says enough is enough. That's it. From that day on. Yes, Roger, just a minute.
I was just a bit confused if it says take my offering, every man whose heart motivates him. So there had to be a willingness of the
Not by force. They had to be right. By the way, it refers to 3 types of contributions. One of them was by force, half a shekel.
Okay.
The second one and the third one had to be from the hearts. However, the Torah is always talk about the treasurer taking it, not the donor giving. The Rebbe says that what bothered Rashi is a farther point. The way it's written is that he had to be taking it from something they already had in their possession. They couldn't go and heard that they need for the curtain of the Holy of Holies, they need crimson wool, or they needed to have linen to go to the Michaels and to buy it and say, here I have. No, no, no. You have to take something that's in your possession, separate it, and then the treasurer can take it. And therefore, that will explain, Rashi had a problem. Where did they have the cedar tree? Cedar tree, as the Rebbe will point out, not only don't grow there, also there is no use for it. In the desert, you use a tent. You don't need firewood. You have no use for cedar tree. And therefore, to say that it grew in the Sinai, next to Mount Sinai, or to say they purchased it from the merchants around, will not accommodate for the command, take from them, let them separate from their possession, and that's what the treasurer will take. It doesn't make, it's impossible, it's not allowed. Therefore, Rashi needed to bring Rabbi Tanchuma, and the Rebbe goes through the details soon, we'll see how it accommodates another question. That Yaakov knew in his spirit, in the Holy Spirit, that there will be a need for it, and he ordered them, he took plants and he ordered them to chop it before they leave Egypt, and carry it with them. Now it's in their possession. It accommodates for that need. Do you understand?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, the emphasis on the takers rather than the givers.
Correct.
Was it because the givers were just were just to separate what they're given,
Right.
and then the takers actually went
And make it,
and took it from
and
them.
make it holy.
So it wasn't brought to the
No,
takers.
no.
The takers went and got it.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
But the simple text, simple understanding is because it depends on the giver, it's their choice what to give and how much.
Right.
You should put emphasis on the giver. But here, in this case of the building of the tabernacle, there are 2 points that are very crucial. Number one, the treasurer takes it and he elevates it and makes it holy, not the giver giving it.
Right.
And number two, not any item can be given unless it was owned by the person beforehand. And that's the idea of tikhu meitam, tikhu, ve'ikhu li truma, let them take from me a contribution, not the word contribution in English, but separating, elevating part of what they already have. And that's the crucial point that Rashi is coming to address. So it's not because of later on in Vayakel it says that they bought whatever they had in their possession because the student didn't study it. The reason is because it says tikhu meitam ve'ikhu li truma, which means they must elevate something they already have. And for that, you cannot buy it from the merchants, and for that, you cannot take it from the forest next to Mount Sinai. Does that help you?
Yeah, it reminds me of the expression, what do you think grows on trees? That's the.
Rabbi, the quality of the.
Ali,
Okay.
this answer.
All day long. All day long.
I'm giving you
Okay.
an opportunity.
All day long.
Couldn't pencil it up.
There's one of your better
I've been
ones.
waiting all year for this.
There's one of your better ones.
To reword the concept slightly, the rabbi explained the same idea from a different point of view. Were the Torah to use forms of the verb to give, the implication would be that there is an obligation incumbent on the donors to do so. Implicit in that obligation is that they do everything they can in order to make the required donation, including chopping trees or buying wood. However, the Torah's use of the form of forms of the verb to take, not to give, but to take, implies that from the donor's perspective, everything was prepared. All that needed to be done was for the treasurers to take something the donor already possessed. Did you understand? So it had to have been already.
So the givers already knew what had to be separated. They already knew.
Yeah, let's say I live in the desert and I hear the command from Moshe and I have gold. I say to him, I come home, I tell my wife, there is some parts of gold I want to donate, and I put it aside. That's it. Come the treasurer
Good luck with
and
that.
picks it up, and he is taking it away from me. But the lifting, Truma, is done from something I already have, and that's all I have to do.
Who pays for the divorce?
Speaking about yourself,
I definitely paid. I definitely paid. Yeah.
says Rashi, says the Rebbe, that's why when Rashi is talking about the contribution, Rashi said separating, not contributing. Teruma means separation, because who made the contribution actually happen? The treasurer, by taking it. The Jew, the donor, all he did is separated. That's why Rashi says the word afrasha. Afrasha means to separate, not giving to give it to God, because giving to God was done by the treasurer. Did I cover this very well?
Mhm.
Now, let's go into another question that the rabbi, and I'm going to give you a summary because I want to get to the Hasidic Kabbalistic interpretation. The Rebbe says, we are on number 3, page 401. It is possible to say that this was also Rashi's intent in his commentary to the phrase. It says, wool dyed techeles argaman, as he comments. Techeles, wool dyed with the blood of chilazon, the hue of which the sea green is sea green. Do you understand what I talk about? Techelet ve'argaman ve'tolat shani. This is 3 of the 13. Techelet in Hebrew, mother in Hebrew, techelet is light blue. The sky is light blue. Rashi says techelet is, it doesn't say wool that dyed in sea green, chilazon. Anybody seen the tzitzit of some people who come here that has a blue, a dark blue? That's the chilazon, according to a Rebbe who discovered them about 100 years ago. It's in Turkey, next to between Turkey and Greece, where it comes very infrequent. The blood is that blue. And that's why they do. I'm not sure that it's correct. I'm not going to discuss it here. So, but Rashi says tchelet is wool dyed in that blue that looks like the ocean, sea green, the ocean. Argaman, another type of color, wool dyed with a type of hue that is called argaman. Rashi says, you know what argaman? Another piece of wood that was dyed, wool that was dyed with the color argaman. Did Rashi tell you what argaman is? No, it just says wool that dyed with argaman. Number 3, and linen, the product of flax, linen refers to tolat shani, refers to flax. Flax is a linen that grows on trees and on bushes, right? Ask the Rebbe. From a casual reading, it appears that Rashi is coming to identify the 3 articles mentioned. I asked you, what do Rashi says? You told me right away. One is the color blue, the other is the color argaman, which Rashi does not tell us what it is, and the third one is flax. Says the Rebbe, nevertheless, that understanding is problematic for the following reasons. It doesn't make sense to read it in Rashi this way. Simple. A, Rashi does not identify argaman. He merely writes that it is a type of hue that is called argaman. He doesn't tell you what it is. I ask you, what is mana? Mana is mana. I ask you, what is whatever? What is a warplane? A warplane. There is no way to explain that way. It doesn't add in any understanding. Moreover, the definition of the term argaman is subject to difference of opinions between Rambam and Ravad. Rambam and Ravad, the Ravad always disagrees with Rambam.
I like it.
Rambam explains that argaman is wool that is dyed red. Similarly, in this commentary to the verse at hand, the Ibn Ezra interprets argaman as having the likeness of red. Ravan differs and explains that argaman refers to a weave of threads of 2 or 3 colors. Therefore, it is called argaman. Argaman means multitude. So we have 2 opinions what argaman is. Let's see what Rashi is going to tell us. Rambam writes that argaman is, what color argaman? red. Ibn Ezra says Argaman is
Light
red.
red.
Red. Rabbad says Argaman is a combination of 2 or 3 different colors weaved together. So what is the color of Argaman? So far we have 2 ideas, either red or a combination of several colors. Says the Rebbe, it is obvious that Rashi does not follow Rabbad's interpretation because he writes that Argaman is a type of hue that is called Argaman. That is, Argaman is the name of one hue and not several hues woven together. So we excluded the Raavad. Rashi does not follow Rabbad that it was a combination of 2 colors because Rashi says it's one color that's called Argaman. However, from the indefinite wording used by Rashi, a type of hue that is called Argaman, it is also apparent that he does not interpret Argaman as red. Why? For were that in the case, he should have stated so explicitly, as he stated regarding Techeles, whose hue is a sea green. As such, we are forced to say that Rashi is following a third approach, that Argaman is a distinct hue of its own. It's impossible that Rashi believed that Argaman is red, because if Rashi says that Argaman is red, he should have said red like Techeles. He says it's blue, green-blue like the sea. He should have said it's red. He doesn't say that. He says Argaman is Argaman. Accordingly, it would seem that the fundamental point is lacking, and Rashi should have identified what color Argaman is. Says the Rebbe, so therefore Rashi missed the main point, explaining at what Argaman is. Rashi does not hold that it's a combination of 2 colors. It's one color, one hue. But what it is, Rashi is missing. Instead, Rashi says Argaman is the color called Argaman. B.
But the comment 29.
Yeah.
It says the first 3 letters of the Hebrew word Argaman are Aleph Resh Gimel, the root letters of the Hebrew word meaning weave.
But that's Ravad, but Rashi cannot follow it. Because otherwise Rashi would have said that it was a combination of 2 hues. Rashi says it was one. So Rashi, Rambam, Ibn Ezra, majority of opinions is it's not a combination. B. Why did Rashi have to explain that linen is the product of flax? The term sheish, meaning linen, was used previously in Parshas Miketz. When Pharaoh appointed Yosef as a leader, it says, he clothed them in linen garments, vayalbesh oto bigdei shesh. And Rashi does not comment at all there. Rashi does not explain what shesh, what flax is. Thus, it can be assumed that even a 5-year-old beginning the study of the Torah, who understands Lashon HaKodesh, the Hebrew language, knows the meaning of the term sheish, and it is not necessary to explain it to him. If so, why was it necessary to explain it here? Why Rashi tells us it's flax? Rashi doesn't explain what gold is. Rashi doesn't explain what shesh, when it was mentioned in Miketz about 6-7 portions ago, because a child knows shesh is flax, like silver, copper, and gold. And therefore, says the Rebbe, that's a second question. Here is the Rebbe's explanation in Rashi. Don't ever mistake yourself that it's Rashi. It's the Rebbe's ingenuity. Says the Rebbe, therefore, it is not, okay, let's read it. It's too important to skip. Therefore, it appears that Rashi's intent in his commentary is not to explain the meaning of these 3 terms, because for that, Rashi already assumes that the child already knows. He's not going to tell us what chelet is. He's not going to tell us what Argaman is, as he doesn't. And he's not going to tell us what flax is, because the child already knows it. But to answer the question of a more general nature raised previously, we're going to go back to the question of Cedar Wood. How did the Jews have these articles in their possession during the journey in the desert? You're talking about dye or use. What people in the desert, what do they have it? Remember, they cannot buy it from the merchants. So what did they have it in their possession? As explained above, the wording of the verse indicates that these articles were already in the Jews' possession. It was only necessary for the treasurers to take them. But that is not entirely understandable. With regards to silver, gold, and copper, the Torah previously stated that related that the Jews requested silver and golden articles from the Egyptians. Moreover, afterwards, they gathered the spoils of the Egyptian chariots that washed up after splitting of the sea, and, as Rashi explains, found on the seashore ornaments of gold, silver, and precious stones of the Egyptians. Thus, it is understandable that the Jews had ample resources of these metals. However, the question arises, where did they get dyes of tcheles, which comes from the blood of chilazon, argaman, etc., in the desert? It is not logical to assume that the Jews took vials of these dyes of different hues for their needs in the desert when they left Egypt. And that's what bothered Rashi. Where did they have tchelet? Where did they have argaman? Where did they have shesh? Gold, silver, and copper, precious stones? It's clearly, that's what they got, the spoils of Egypt. But there was no dye, those vials of dye, those buckets of this, there was no laws that they could have used it to paint their tents. Where did they have tchelet that came from a chilazon, from an animal that comes out of the sea near Turkey? Where did they have that argaman? And that's what bothers. Same as flax. Flax. Rashi answered this question by explaining that tcheles does not refer to dye, but to wool dyed in the blood of the chilazon. Remember I pointed out to you, Harry?
Yes.
Read it again. We all tend to say what we think, to read what we think it says. You think tchelet is Rashi explaining the color. No. Rashi starts, Tzemer tzavua bekachol, a wool that was dyed in that. They didn't have vials of those hues because there is no place for them to have it in their possession, and they couldn't have purchased it. But they had wool dyed in that color. Wool makes sense. An argaman to wool dyed in the type of hue that is called argaman. The Rebbe says, Rashi don't care to tell you what the color argaman is. It may be red, it may be pink, it may be orange, it doesn't matter. It's the wool that was already dyed. There is no question at all as to how they had these woolen articles. We are in the middle of page 404. Articles in the desert. Because the Torah relates that they had an abundance of sheep even when they were in Egypt. As Moshe told Pharaoh, we will go out with our flocks and herds. Similarly, it is explicitly stated that the Jews left Egypt with sheep and cattle and an immense amount of livestock. It says that in the Torah, in the debate of who is going to go out from Egypt to serve God. Moshe says, Gam mikneinu, gam kareinu, our sheep and our cattle will go. V'tzonu bakar mikne kaved meod. It says when they left, they had an enormous amount, an immense amount of sheep, cattle, etc. If so, it is not difficult to fathom that the Jews had a large amount of wool, including wool that was dyed in different hues. And that's what Rashi tells us. You know what, Chelet? Wool that was dyed, which makes no sense because it should be the dye itself, not wool dyed in it. But Rashi says, no, it had to have been already dyed with that color. Now you understand that they had it in their possession, because otherwise they wouldn't have it in their possession. They would have to purchase it. Same as Argaman. What?
They must have an immense amount of it to give.
Of immense amount of what? Wool?
Yes, a
It says, Mikne kaved meod.
Yeah.
Moshe tells Pharaoh, I will not let my people go unless the children and the cattle will come, and you will add also. You know, and it says that they gave them when they pushed them out. They gave them more. So they had so much. They had a lot. Similarly, in order to clarify how it was possible for the Jews to possess linen that was ready for use in the sanctuary, Rashi explained that linen is the product of flax. Rashi had already stated in his commentary that flax grows in Egypt. It says over there by the hail that the flax did not break because it was soft. Anybody familiar with the verse in the Torah? The Torah in the Torah is "Ve'apishta ve'akusemet lo nuku ki afilotena." It says in the Torah after the hail, the strong bushes that were strong, they were broken from the force of the hail, except the flax and another type of grain did not die. The Torah says they were very young, and so they were bent. They were able to
But
sustain
it's surprising because when the hail came down, it's down the hail was also
and
fire.
fire. But it says, "V'abishta v'akusemet lo nuku," did not get smitten. Ki afilot eina. It's in the text. Says Rashi, therefore, it can be assumed that when the Jews spoiled Egypt, they also took flax with them. Now we can understand why Rashi says wool dyed in blue, wool dyed in argaman, even though Rashi does not explain what argaman is. All Rashi wants to tell us is they didn't have dye. They didn't have vials of color. All they had was wool that was already dyed in that
You
color.
can also assume that Jews had everything because in Goshen, the mockers did not bother them at all. So everything that they had stayed alive.
Right? They still have it. Based on the above, that also in his preceding commentaries, Rashi was explaining how the Jews could possess in the desert the article required for the sanctuary as mentioned by the Torah. It is possible to present a straightforward resolution to this quandary noted by the author of, okay, the rabbi is going to one more question that the Taz, to raise up, is asking about Rashi adding a vav. We're not going to talk about that. Preparing for the future. Page 406, page number 5. Nevertheless, the matter is not entirely resolved. True, the verse indicates that the cedar wood was already in the Jews' possession. Consequently, it is necessary to say that it was prepared beforehand as a result of Yaakov's instructions. In other words, okay, now we understand. How did they have it in their possession? Yaakov took it with him to Egypt, the plants. He grew it, and he asked his children to tell their children when they leave Egypt, they should carry those cedar wood. However, the reason why Yaakov had this preparation undertaken requires explanation. Since cedar wood would have been obtained from non-Jewish travelers, merchants, or from nearby woods, why did Yaakov have to undertake the effort of bringing the plant and planting cedar trees in Egypt more than 200 years before the command to build the sanctuary? Asked the Rabbi, they could have gotten it from merchants. They could have gotten it from a forest that grew next to Mount Sinai. Why did they need to why Yaakov needed 200 years earlier to start working about that? Here is the question. Here is the answer. Rashi alludes, towards the bottom of page 407. Rashi alludes to the resolution of these questions by mentioning the name of the author of this teaching, Rabbi Tanchuma. The name Tanchuma, usually Rashi does not tell you the source and does not mention the name of the author unless the name adds in the understanding of the answer. Here, it says, Piresh Rabbi Tanchuma. It says Medrash, Umedrashor, says Rashi. Rashi doesn't even bring a Medrash if it helps understand the simple text. The fact that Rashi says that Rabbi Tanchuma explains is because look at the name Tanchuma. You know what Tanchum means? Comfort. The name Tanchuma relates to the Hebrew word Tanchumim, meaning comfort. Rashi states, Rabbi Tanchuma explained that our father Yaakov foresaw with his Holy Spirits and took these actions because they would bring the Jewish people comfort. Why Yaakov did it? Why they use it? Because Yaakov wanted to bring comfort to the Jewish people through their hell of suffering in Egypt. Throughout the duration of Egyptian exile, particularly when the Jews suffered arduous servitude and had to endure a heartbreaking decree, every son that is born cast into the river. They drew comfort not only from God's promise, I will certainly cause you to ascend, but also from gazing at the cedar trees that Yaakov brought and planted in Egypt. It undertook the extensive effort this entailed because he foresaw, this is the text in Tanchuma, he foresaw with the Holy Spirit that the Israelites were destined to build a sanctuary in the desert. He therefore brought cedar trees to Egypt and planted them in there. he commanded his sons, who conveyed this command to their children and later descendants, to take them along with as when they left Egypt. In other words, there were other ways that the Jews could have obtained cedar wood for the sanctuary. Nevertheless, to generate comfort, the distinguishing quality of Rabbi Tanchuma for Jewish people, Yaakov brought cedar trees and planted them in Egypt and commanded their descendants, his descendants, to take them along when they left Egypt, because he did this. The trees to be taken when the Jews left Egypt were planted so that they would stand before their eyes throughout the entire duration of the Egyptian exile and servitude. Seeing these cedar trees reminded them and drew their attention to their eventual redemption. He planted those trees and he says, one day you will leave and you'll build a sanctuary for me, for God. Here's the walls that you're going to be constructed from. Now he planted it. He didn't tell them before you leave Egypt, purchase cedar trees. He planted them, and so it grew in front of their eyes in Goshen. When every day they would go by and they see this forest of trees, he said, one day, our great-great-great-grandfather, the holy Yaakov, planted it because one day we're going to leave, and this is going to serve as a sanctuary for God. And that gave them comfort. That's why Rashi brings Peresh Rabbi Tanchuma, because the idea, the explanation that they had to carry those trees. By the way, these are enormous, large trees, very heavy trees that people couldn't carry so simply. It wasn't so, anybody knows the size?
Yeah, well, they're huge. They're huge.
They were huge and they were very tall. And
They have
yet,
Cedar garden, when you go through Alligator Alley, there's
I didn't know.
reserve there.
All right.
Cedar reserve.
So these are huge trees, but the reason they did it 200 years earlier is so that when they go through the most harshest condition, the children are being sunk in the Nile, and they are being beaten up for demands that is impossible for a human to achieve. They go home or they leave their home and they see those trees and says, one day we're going to be free. One day we're going to use it for the sanctuary. And that's why they took it out. And therefore Rashi needed to bring Rabbi Tanchuma. So God says, let them take, meaning the emphasis on the treasure taking, because the Jew had to only separate from what they already have in their possession. Therefore, they couldn't buy it from merchants, and therefore they couldn't take it from a forest that was near Mount Sinai, according to Rashi. And Rashi brings it in Rabbi Tanchuma. I want to add one more thing. Yeino shel Torah, the deeper Kabbalistic interpretation. The Rebbe points out that Jacob knew that one day the Jewish people will be in the desert. And in the desert, they will be commanded to create a sanctuary for God. How do you create a sanctuary for God in the middle of the desert? You need to have cedar trees. Cedar trees refers to the tzaddikim. Tzaddik katama rifrach ke'eres balvanon ishken. That tzaddik is compared to a cedar tree, to a very strong, tall tree. And therefore, that's the Kabbalistic understanding. Yaakov told the Jewish children, as long as you rely on your forefathers and the righteous people, you will be able to build a sanctuary in the middle of the desert. So we live in a desert where ethically misbehaving is acceptable, where not telling the truth is actually commonplace. And we need, that's a desert, spiritual desert. We need to build a sanctuary. How do you come to build a sanctuary? By relying on the wall. The walls, the main body of that sanctuary is built from cedar trees that was planted by our forefathers. Relying on our previous holy people who,
Relying on your current.
on current, okay, and current holy people, thank you, that they make that sanctuary, they guard us, they direct us, they connect us to God, so we are able to create a perfect sanctuary for God.
Relying on him.
Current. Tzaddik. It's the tzaddikim of the.
And
current
that will bring us,
Now.
and that will bring us, that we concluded, to the full comfort of the coming of Moshiach, whose name is, anybody knows the name of Moshiach? Menachem. The Talmud says his name is Menachem. Why is it called Menachem?
Give comfort.
Because he's bringing comfort. Tanchuma is from the word Nechama. Nechama is comfort. Menachem, he will bring comfort. Thank you very much.
Think of the emunah that people used to have knowing that they weren't going to leave Egypt because in 200 years.